Hi, in this video we're going to show you how to use Akamai's Property Manager API, also known as PAPI. And rather than just simply going through all the documentation, which you can certainly do, and all of that is available on developer.akamai.com, we're going to go and use the Akamai portal to kind of visualize some of the key concepts before you get started. So first thing we're going to go to is developer.akamai.com/API, just to give you an idea of where to find the documentation, which is it's always good to have in the back of your back on the napkin here. So if you go in here under developer.akamai.com/API, and then in the search type in PAPI, you'll find the documentation for PAPI. But there's a lot of concepts here. PAPI is a pretty extensive API, and it can be a little daunting. So I'm going to go through here what all the key concepts are that you need to understand before you can make use of the of PAPI. So let's log into the Luna portal, the Akamai portal. So I'm going to have a test account here. And the first concept I'm going to go over are contracts and groups. Contracts is for all intents and purposes, is a special kind of group. It's a top-level group. And groups are, it's like a directory structure of all your all your things that you have on the Akamai platform, all the different artifacts that you create, property manager configurations, edge host names, CP codes, GTM configurations. They all live in this directory structure that you can kind of browse here. If we click on the top level group, which is also known as the contract, you can see all the different groups here over on the left, and these are your directories essentially. If we click on one of these, PAPI Lab, you'll see that it has a number of properties. These are the property manager configurations. And you can also see here when you mouse over a property, you can see the contract ID right here, and this contract ID is sometimes required in the PAPI calls. So if you need to find it, this is a way to find out what your contract IDs are. You can also see another kind of quick tip here is that at the top of in your URL in your browser, you can see this GID here. This is the group ID for the current group that I'm in. So PAPI Lab is the group name, and 113897 is the group ID. This is also used sometimes in the PAPI calls. All right, so now let's look at a property. This is kind of the key artifact that PAPI is used for to manage. So the property manager configurations have all the instructions on how to process your content on the Akamai platform. So let's look into this property manager configuration. And we'll see here that there's two versions of it. There's version 1 and version 2. Neither of them are active on either staging or production network. So this is just a test config that I created. So if I go to click on version 2, I'll now see sort of the details of this configuration. And first thing to note is that it has a property hostname. This is the customer-facing or end-user-facing hostname used to deliver traffic through Akamai. And then it has a corresponding edge hostname, which is a CNAME that you CNAME this hostname over to this edge hostname to direct the end-user traffic onto the Akamai platform to the nearest or the most optimally performing edge server. And PAPI is also used to manage the edge host names. So creating, listing, etc. edge host names you can do via PAPI. Now let's drill down into the next concept, which is the rule tree, or the rules, the property manager rules. So the rules are basically the instructions for how to process an incoming request for your website. So there's a default rule which has certain required behaviors, like an origin server behavior. These are the behaviors are the tasks to perform for the incoming traffic. So in this case, we need to know key thing. We need to know where to go fetch the content. There's an origin behavior. It looks like this. This is the host name to go forward to. The default rule does not have any sort of if statements. It's always applied. Another thing to note in the default rule is that typically you have a CP code or a content provider code. This is also an artifact that you have to have at least one of associated with your property manager config. And PAPI is also used to manage these CP codes. So you can create CP codes via PAPI. Now let's look at some of the other rules here. So there, you see there's in addition to the default rule, there are some sub-rules, and these can be nested, and each rule can contain one or zero or more if statements or criteria. So these are the logical tests that we do to determine whether or not to apply a set of behaviors underneath that rule. So in this particular case, we're matching on a file extension of the incoming request. If that's CSS or JavaScript, then we set the caching for 1 day in this particular case. So this rule tree here, what that looks like when you're working with PAPI, you end up working with a JSON object representation of this rule tree. So let's look at what that would look like for this particular configuration. So here I have downloaded the JSON object, and I can see here that I can find, for instance, my origin behavior under the list of behaviors in sort of the default rule. There's the origin behavior, and here's the origin host name that I'm going to go forward to that corresponds to that same host name that you see up here in the default rule in the Property Manager UI.